welcome everyone to the Bridge Club. We are so happy you're here. I'm Catherine Haskins. I am one of the co-founders. Brenda Andreessen, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brenda Andreessen. I think almost everybody here has met me at one time or another, so good to see you all.
We are going to have a fun talk tonight. You already had to approve to be able to be a part of the video to know that we are recording and that this will be shared. So we want to make sure that everyone was aware of that. Before we jump in, we're going to start with the toast, and then Brenda's going to kick us off, and then we're going to jump fully in on an entire topic about where are all the pets going, if not your practice. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yep, this should be a fun one. So, okay, so I get to do the toast tonight, which is really fun. So, what, you guys ready? Does anybody need to go get it?
I'm frozen.
Anytime I pick up my drink, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. So here we go. So we are so excited to see all of you here tonight on the Bridge Club. We appreciate that. We are all connected because of our love of pets and the veterinary profession. So just think of all the phenomenal things we can do when we're connecting together like this on a regular basis. So with that in mind, let's talk about where the pets are going. So cheers.
Cheers, everybody. We lost Deb somehow. She's coming back. I know she's coming back.
Well, she said she was freezing, so she may have to, unthaw and
come back in. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's dig in. So this is what's really interesting. Catherine and I have been talking about this topic for quite some time. And it seems like all of us are seeing study after study that is showing that pet ownership is up, right? We know the available number of veterinarians and qualified veterinary technicians is down. We can't find enough of them to staff the practices that want to staff up. So, then we also hear these studies that say we're not getting enough people in the doors of these veterinary practices. So Catherine and I kept thinking, where the heck are all these pets going? If they are not going to our regular brick and mortar veterinary practices, and you look at analytics data that shows veterinary care is actually up after 2019, the trends seem to be up everywhere. But where are they going if they're not coming in your doors? So we're going to reference a little bit of data from Trone, some data from BHMA, a couple of other places that we found interesting, but we want your thoughts. This is kind of an open forum conversation that we will guide a little bit with a couple of questions. But what have you seen? What are you hearing? What are your thoughts and opinions about what's happening out there? And then we'll kind of wrap up the evening by talking a little bit about what we think the profession can potentially do about this problem of not seeing enough pets in your practice. So, that's what we're going to talk about. So we'll tee it up and start talking.
So before we begin, what was it about this topic? I'd love for us to kind of people to just chime in that made you wanted to come to this topic. What was it that you were hoping to uncover or make sure that we heard? Because I think it's interesting. Bruce is here specifically. Bruce has actually presented some of this data and he's heard different things. So I am curious what made you want to join the conversation from all different facets. So chime on in.
Yeah. Other than the fact that you love us and want to help support us, we know that's kind of a no doubt. But beyond that, why are you here?
Deb, I'm going to unmute you, Deb, and I'm going to ask the question because I think you also had some comments. The question I want is, before we even begin to dive into the data, why did you choose to join this conversation? You're muted, Kirk. There we go. Wait. You got to unmute, Kirk.
Wait, I want to unmute. Kirk can't mute. Kirk, I never thought we'd get you to be this quiet for this long, but we're having trouble unmuting you right now.
I think Kirk has it muted on his end.
There we go.
It does, yeah. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, I see all the data, a lot of the data. I see articles. I see all the stuff going on. I also experienced 25 and 30 years ago the switch from ethical to OTC in livestock. And so I'm curious to see what those in practice are talking about. And that's why I'm here.
Anyone else?
This is my first conversation. I'm involved in digital marketing for veterinarians. And when I saw the headline, I thought, what do you mean? Where are they going? So I'm really intrigued. We work really hard to help traditional vets get tails into the door. And, you know, so I'm just really interested in learning more about this.
Good.
Interesting. Anyone else? I know. 'Cause Deb,
Diane?
I thought you sent me a note about it. You said, I hope we're saying the other side of the story. So, Deb, do you want to jump in on any of that?
Well, the other side of the story, of course, is the, breeders being so bad-mouthed, adopt, don't shop, everything's being spayed. So that will make for less pets walking through the door for sure.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm
No, I
interested
don't
in
know.
this. I'm interested in the access to care issue. If there is. I mean, most of what we're seeing is that, or most of what we're being told is that, yes, revenues are up, but it's fewer people spending more.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we're pushing people towards are increasing the, the standard of care, which is a good thing, but also people who are not willing or able to meet that standard of care, where are they going? And so, I'm interested in what we are doing. And again, we were always told that if we didn't do things ourselves, we would be disrupted. And to see the Walmart thing, and I had the same knee-jerk reaction as everybody else, but then I'm also like, well, how many of those people going into Walmart buying cat and dog food now are seeking veterinary care? And
Hold that thought, Jules, because we're going to circle around a little bit later on to having the discussion specifically about our opinions in that area, which would be kind of fun.
Absolutely. But with that, whether or not, because I'm not sure we have, I think we've got like 2 or 3 practices on, but in general, do we, as a grouping or individuals, how do you feel, you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you think new pet acquisition is a challenge today, a greater challenge than it's ever been?
New client acquisition? Is that what
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess we should define that by like, in the more traditional veterinary practice, right? As opposed to some of the.
Thumbs up or thumbs down? Do you think it's a bigger challenge?
Jill said yes. Jean
This
says
way.
yes.
Oh, Bruce. Oh, and Kurt. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Interesting. Judy, can you put it in the chat so we can see, since you, that way you can tell us in the chat how you're feeling about this, because we're not sure we're getting your kind of point of view on it.
And Diane, what about you, Wayne? And from the cat perspective, what are you seeing in the community of feline, of cats?
I'm not quite as in touch with it as I once was, because my practice that I have at the Jersey Shore is a strictly end of life practice. So,
Yeah. Okay. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay.
what's interesting is just how many new practices opened in Philadelphia last
Yeah,
year.
just cat ones. Yep. Mhm.
Well, no, just regular practices. I wouldn't say just cat practices, but dog and cat practices. And there's a big launch of a new, I don't know if you know about a new chain facilities called Heart and Paw.
Heart and Paw. Yeah.
We're having a grand opening right in Center City next weekend, or maybe it's this week.
Yeah. They started with King of Prussia and they've opened like 5 since then, I think. They've got several coming up and down the East Coast. So,
And they're de novo, right?
yeah.
Yeah. and
What are they called?
Heart-
Heart and Paw.
Heart and Paw.
And then I just learned that a really high-end referral center is opening its 3rd location not far from me here at the Jersey Shore. So that's to tertiary and secondary care. People are willing to pay for it. So I think I might see a different population here.
Yeah.
And, on the East Coast where I am, because of how strong the human-animal bond is and how much more discretionary income there is in this part of the country. So I think I might have a different experience than other people would have.
Yeah, I suspect you're right, especially because you've got a lot of people who are now kind of either retired or partially retired who, are coming to the shore to spend more time and bringing their animals with them. It's an interesting mix. So let's talk a little bit about, to kind of kick off the conversation, let's talk a little bit first about kind of the impact of options. We're seeing a lot of articles about all of the challenges, or not challenges to, but in additions to, options to a brick and mortar, practice. And we're going to continue to see, it seems that. I think everybody on this call has been in tune enough with all of the new types of practices coming out and the different models and trends. It seems that trend away from brick and mortar continues to happen. Yet here Diane is telling us the dichotomy of the fact that there are a lot more brick and mortar happening. So we'd really be, curious to see what kind of data there is around that. And Catherine, you pulled some really interesting numbers, I think, and Bruce, you can probably speak to this a little bit as well.
Because Bruce helped me get the numbers, so let's just be clear how I got the numbers. So if I'm going to call it
I'll
out.
tee it up for you. You don't
Yeah.
get the bait.
So but I will tell everybody in the chat, I've included the entire article where these numbers are actually coming from. And this is directly from Atrone. And so in there, so because for those of you who are new to the Bridge Club, we don't do PowerPoints, though we are going to break our rule in about 3 weeks, and we're actually going to have our very first slide showing because it's too important. But tonight we're not breaking that rule, so you all can click on the link. But it says that according to a group of pet owners who saw, according to the data done by Trone, that there's a wide variety of services being sought by pet owners. In fact, pet owners are traditionally now having more than one source for where they're going. 65% are going to private practices. 24% are going to chains, like what they're referring to as Banfield or BCA. 22% are going to mobile or discount vaccine clinics. So this goes to the beginning of the access to care that you were talking about, Jules. Specialty care or especially veterinary clinics, 21%. 16% shelter clinics. 15% for in-home veterinary care, and then 11% for the retail outlets that are like that are in Walmart, etc. So they don't consider those clinics to be the chains. They consider them to be separate. So those are some pretty significant numbers. If you're saying 65% are private, and then you really have this pretty close to equal share between Banfield and the discount vaccine clinics before you start to, if you just take the veterinary specialty out of the mix, which is 21%, then you have your shelter, your in-home, and your retail, which I'll be interested to see, again, to Jules' point of where this retail, oh my gosh, I get this all the time. It's not Cabela's, it's the truck and tractor. What is it called?
Tractor Supply.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. Don't want to misbrand. But more and more increasing populations are heading to those outlets. And right now, this data had them at 11%. Has anyone heard a higher number on that by chance?
Are you talking about the corporates like the Banfields, or what are you talking about? Which
So the
ones?
corporates are getting 24%, but what they're referring to these retail outlets are
like PetSmart and things like that.
no, because PetSmart would be Banfield.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about like Pet IQ.
And this
It's
is
like when a veterinarian sets up a vaccine clinic at the Tractor Supply, or Tractor Supply partners with a vaccine manufacturer.
Right. Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Did I give the wrong link in that article? Did I just do that?
And is this pet owners self-identifying where they're getting care from? Was that the data?
Yes, according to the Trone data, yes.
Now, I would love to see that mobile and discount vet broken apart. That would be interesting to me, because I actually saw an article too. It was not in the veterinary space, but it was about it was an access to care type of thing. It was about mobile veterinary practices going around to these different parts of the cities where practices didn't want to locate because there just wasn't enough foot traffic necessarily. So they started taking mobile practices in there. So it'd be kind of fun to see that data. Several, we'll have to see if Trone can break that out. Bruce, maybe if they could pull that out, or if it's somewhere that we just haven't seen. I'm kind of fascinated by the whole mobile practice idea myself. I think if I were a veterinarian, that'd be kind of fun.
So what I would be curious about is, would we, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, Brenda, and you can, because I know that we already went through kind of, oh, no, I'm not going to ask that question. Never mind. So then I just saw, there's a reason we have one of these, so that we can run through everything. This is called the Run Show.
Contrary to popular belief, we actually think through how these conversations maybe should flow. So
then you're actually in it, you go, oh, well, that makes sense. She's actually taking me to the right spot. So what I find so interesting is if you look at that data, right? And so what was new to me, but they didn't give us the percentage of how many people have multiple sources for the veterinarian. When I read that, it didn't shock me, but I wanted to know what percentage had multiple. because I think to myself as a human with my medical care. So I have my primary care physician, I have my OBGYN, right? Then I have the emergency. When the minute I get a sneeze or a cough, I'm not driving all the way to my primary care. I go to the little
Doc in a box.
Doc in a box, because I'm like, he'll give it to me quick. I don't have to be there very long. And now I'm starting to use telemedicine. So what's interesting to me in human behavior is I have multiple based on, oh, and that doesn't even include my eye care or my dentist, right? So that doesn't even include that. So what I wish this data had provided us is what percentage of new pet owners are having multiple, like what percentage of them?
Very good.
I'm sorry?
Talking to my dog, sorry.
Oh, because to me, I think that would be really powerful because, you know, you're talking from a digital perspective and how you're recruiting and helping practices, Jeannie, but is it Jeannie or Jean?
Jean.
Jean? Jean?
Jean, yep. It's just
Okay.
spelled the French
Got the
way.
E at the end. It keeps making me want to say Jeannie.
It's just French, you know.
But the notion being is there extra space then for multiple practices to have that relationship with a single veterinarian now? I mean, with multiple veterinarians, and who thinks they then own that relationship, I think would be kind of interesting to delve in even deeper. This is even before we get to access to care, Jules. This is just the notion of multiple sources of care. What do you think of that concept?
Which exists already, right?
We've been through it already.
Yeah.
Well, but
We
it's
already,
coming back.
we already know how to handle that. Equine, cattle, dairy, etc. We've got in the breeder space. You've got 2, 3, 4 veterinarians involved
Yep.
routinely.
Yep.
And I think the biggest issue is that we now have, as an industry, better data than we've ever seen. And we really don't have a 10, 15, and 20-year benchmark that's related to the level of data we have today. So just as 5, 6 years ago, we didn't have enough veterinarians, when the final analysis was done, suddenly we have too many, or not enough, excuse me. We had too many 5 years ago and not enough now. So I think it's hard. It's hard to make a good comparison to previous times. We're becoming better educated almost on a daily basis in animal health.
So that's really interesting, you know, comment there, Kirk. So is there enough room for all these kinds of practices from you guys' opinion? I mean, you know, people who are in primary care practice or who have the traditional brick and mortar standalone, you know, 1 doctor, 2 doctor hospital, I think still remain frightened about the competition. But how do we feel about that? Because Jules brought up access to care. We brought the fact that, you know, where Diane lives, there are people who are willing to spend a lot of money on their pets. So from your perspective, is it okay to have all these different options so that people can choose what's right for them?
Well, I think we can't say it's okay or not okay. It's what is happening, right? So,
yeah.
and I believe that probably it is okay because we can't stop what the consumer wants, which is convenience, price transparency, and engagement from their clients. I feel like the inefficient producer, whether it's a 1 doctor practice, a 2, a 3, a 4, the inefficient producer in the next 5 to 10 years will be out of business. So
Right.
they're going to lose this volume to the other care providers that are offering the service level. And many times it's through technology that they're able to offer the service level. So they're going to be gone. And I apologize, I joined late, but to build on Catherine, your comment on Trone, there's various other data points that back the same thing. So Guggenheim and Karen Felstead and Animalytics published this data, which is very similar, Catherine, to what you're referencing, and perhaps it is Trone, but they're showing how the independent is still getting new clients, but not as much. And those new clients are going to chains at a retailer, standalone chains, mobile, right? So they're going to these other sort of pop-up locations and not necessarily always going to a primary care veterinarian for their routine care. And I think you got to layer on top of that the VHMA data and it's showing downturns in new client visits, and there's 700 independent practices. They're showing downturns in new clients over the past 4 years, every single quarter. And the reason I wanted to join the call was I presented this data in 2 or 3 sessions at VMX, and I had practice managers and veterinarians coming up to me afterwards and saying, hey, that's not the case in my practice. We're swamped. We couldn't take any more new clients. So my experience in my practice contradicts your data. So I wanted to join this call to figure out what's going on, right? How can I explain this to somebody? And my only answer that I've received so far after talking to a number of peers is that I need to ask these practices, are they measuring their actual new clients? And have they historically been tracking it? Because it's the same thing when you ask a veterinarian, how many of your patients are compliant to heartworm, and they'll tell you 90%. And then we used to pull the data at Vet Street and it would be like 40% if you were lucky. So maybe it's about perception, but I don't know.
And who are these new clients? I mean, if they're practices that are operating in areas where people are used to the existing model, and Diane, it's interesting, with Philly, there's World of Animals, there's Heart and Paw, there's a bunch of new practice models coming up. I think mostly because there's such a saturation of people and a gentrification of those areas. I think there's more people coming in who already subscribe to the existing model. But and we look at it in the insurance world again of like, yes, we see that there are people who subscribe to the existing models around pet health insurance, but they tend to be people who look like the same people demographically and socioeconomically and all those things, right? So I think, Bruce, to your point, in those areas where you're getting a greater population of people who don't subscribe to the model, you're having frankly, the older, wealthier people coming in more and paying for more, but we're not getting the clients. And we've seen all the data around, what we'll call millennial generations and lower want a different model of care.
I think there's another thing to add to this whole equation too, is that even Banfield has done a study that basically said that what the veterinarian's idea of preventive care and what a pet owner's idea of preventive care are 2 completely different things.
Yeah.
And the pet owner is considering the overall health and wellness of the pet as equally as important as vaccinations and preventatives. And so if the veterinarian is really only focused on that portion of preventative care, it becomes a commodity to the pet owner. And then they go ahead and shop that around and automatically seek alternate care models without providing any level of value to the pet owner. So that alone in itself erodes the market for the mixture of types of practices that are practicing and that are available. So I think that's another shift in thought that you have to consider, is what is the pet owner considering important for the pet's health. And with the availability of constant information at their fingertips, either through the internet or peers or whatever, they're substituting that for care and only visiting when it's a transaction, like I can't figure out what's wrong, so now I'm going to go to the vet.
Reactive care versus preventative care.
Right,
Exactly. To see what we learned from all of the telehealth models that are coming up. There'll be some really interesting data they can collect too on what kinds of calls they get. It'd be interesting. It's going to be a little bit down the road, right, before we can aggregate any of that. But think about the different types of questions they might get. And those are people getting the questions as opposed to Dr. Google getting the questions. So that could be something for us to keep our eye on.
Well, so to chime in on that, as a few of you do know, Whisker Docs just ended up getting the patent on their algorithm that actually helps filter those conversations to ensure that they're getting the right diagnosis to that pet owner and what is needed. So they've actually patented it, which is incredible and they are also finding at Whisker Docs that they have people call Whisker Docs back first before to give them an update on the pet versus them just going to the vet and then dropping the call and never calling them back, which I find to be really fascinating. But to all this point, additional data that's in that article, and again, yes, it does not equal 100%. Thank you, people, for checking my math. But why people leave? Okay, so what's one of the number one reasons why people leave their veterinarian? Let's see if you all know without me even telling
Relationships.
you. Ooh, that actually wasn't number one.
Nope. Guess again.
Death or move.
Move.
Moving was the number one as the highest rate of why they leave. But goes to exactly what Bruce was saying. Lower cost. They have a negative experience. It wasn't convenient. They talk about the fact that they were seeking better care, better office hours. So they're looking, it goes into that entire convenience factor or cost factor that Bruce was also talking about, like the transparency. So,
But that goes to relationship, Catherine, because cost and convenience will be trumped by relationship.
Unless you just can't get it cheaper and you really can't afford it, which will take us to the access to care conversation. But if you get to a point where you're being nickel and dimed and you can't afford it, you're not going to keep going as much as you like the guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's like getting bad hair color, right? I mean, rather than tell them that you don't like what they did, you go find someone else.
Right.
I know all you men can relate to that, but
You might not even get to the point of.
Well, sometimes you lose it.
But, you know,
And you really never go back.
Right. Yeah, exactly. With the comfort with the conversation, right? If you think, I don't understand why you're charging me so much, it's easier to leave and say that it was for lower cost when really it might be lack of understanding of the cost or the reason behind the recommendation, right? So, no,
Communication.
If you don't like the hair color, have them do it
Just
again.
plain lack of affordability. I mean, again, when we were in practice in Philly, like we added QC6, as really their standard of care. So, that's an extra $60 that they maybe weren't spending before. And it just, it keeps chipping in, right?
It does. It does.
It does.
I will tell you, I just left my dentist, who happens to be my neighbor. He doesn't know this yet. He's not a Bridge Club person, so I can say this. We left because, well, when we got an insurance company, he doesn't accept it. So yay. But the reason being is he was overselling. Every 2 seconds, there was something that was saying, it was also all over the entire office, sell, sell, sell. And every transaction said, well, we can get that for you. And we can get, it was too much. I just wanted my teeth cleaned, just clean my teeth. There's nothing wrong. Let's get out. But so it happens. So people are looking at the price, even though I have to have beverages with them next weekend at a party.
Well, it's funny. My son, who lives in Austin, just left his vet for the same reason. They have a practice. It appeals to millennials, and there's transparent pricing all over the place. But he said, every time I go there, I go in, I think I'm going to spend $100, and I come out and they try to sell me all this stuff. And he adores his cat, and so I don't want to not get her these things, but I feel ambushed because I can't decide whether she needs them or not. And the net result is now I've spent $300.
Yeah.
So he ended up, he left.
Go to another one. Yeah. It's the guilt. It's the guilt because I'm not a good father.
But that's the mismatch in expectations versus what the pet owner thinks is important, right?
Right.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, in that practice, you said that he went there because he's a millennial and it appealed to him. What does that mean?
They have a lot of high tech, and they do things like you can drop your pet off like in the morning on your way to work, and they'll keep your pet during the day, and then have the visit, and then you can pick it up at night. And they really pride themselves on, they talk a lot about transparent pricing. So the price list is right on the wall when you go in, and all of that. I mean, and they were one of our clients. And so he went to the opening, and there's something about the office, and they don't have a reception desk. People just have iPads and kind of come out, and the staff comes
It's
out.
Zippy Vet. He went to Zippy Vet.
He did go to Zippy Vet.
Audrey's not associated with them anymore.
Yes, Audrey's not.
I know she isn't. She is delightful. And, so he went with me to their opening, but as a millennial, he was just like, this is everything I want from a vet.
Right.
But he said, and he has nationwide insurance. So, he knows that he can get things covered. It was one of the few times Mom got to be right. I convinced him to get that. And he was like, oh, Mom. And then he works at EA Games, and you guys, it's one of the companies that it's a benefit for them. And so he goes like, all right, I got it. And then he started using it, and he called me up and he was like, oh my God, I was able to just, put my claim in right in the office. This is really good stuff. And I was like, see, mom knows what she's talking about every once in a
I bet
while.
you that $20 later, Jim.
Right. But even with all that, I think it wasn't even the money, it was the guilt. I
Yep,
think he
it's
just
the guilt.
felt like, I don't know, he loves his cat. He would do anything for her. And then he kept feeling like, I'm not equipped to decide all these things. And every time I go in there, they tell me she needs 3 or 4 more things. And so he was like, do I say yes? Do I say no? So I think that, so he's going to a place maybe with maybe a little less relationship or different relationship.
So it's interesting because, Jean, what you're talking about here is that whole demand for diversification that we talked about, right? So, and I just want to make a note too that we have gone to past our 25-minute mark. So if anybody has to drop off, thank you for joining us. We totally understand it. However, we would love to have you stay for just a little bit longer so we can, chat a tad bit more about this. But it is interesting because clearly pet owners are going to choose with their wallets. They're going to choose with their feet, right? It's going to continue to be a conversation though, because it's my husband's Gigi always said, well, it all depends on whose ox is being gored, right?
Right.
If they're coming to you, you're happy and you think there's no problem. If people are leaving you because you're not offering the kind of practice people in your area want, then there's a massive problem. So I guess it leads me to a question here, and then we'll kind of talk about some more solutions is there really a problem, or are we making this up?
I think there's a huge problem in having the gumption to ask questions of your clients when everything's going really well. Because I think you really need to know what you're doing really well. And like Jean said, if they had sent him a flyer the second or third time he was there and said, what one thing would you like to change? He would probably have said, stop selling me shit when I'm walking out the door, because I really can't do that. Mm-hmm. And they would have understood that maybe not for everyone, but definitely for him, this wasn't something that worked for him. And I think that what I find in the presentations I do, veterinarians don't really take a lot of time to, as my mother used to say, farm. They don't understand why people walk through their door. And they really need to know that so that they can keep them walking through the door.
Which is interesting, right? Because getting new patients is hard. So why don't you try harder to keep the people who are coming to you right now? Because we all know it's much harder to get new patients and new clients than it is old existing.
And old clients can bring you new clients.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
But there is the whole, communication thing. So those of us, who've been in practice know that people will be dissatisfied as shit. Can I say shit? Is that okay?
Yeah, you can.
That's right. I just did. So it's okay.
Club.
We're the gun club.
We drink. We carry on.
So people will be dissatisfied, and they'll be as nice as pie to the veterinarian, then go and bitch and complain to the front desk, or not, or they won't say anything to anybody, and they'll just go their way. And I think it's laudable that we think that if asked, people would give us the real reason, but I don't even think that's true necessarily. I think to me, now as a pet owner, not as a practitioner, I think more and more like there's just this, and we'd see it. Coming out of Western, everything we're doing within the industry is gearing the cost of care higher and higher. When we talk to IDEXX, or when you talk to whomever, there's always well, we need to do more preventive medicine up front. We need to do this, the isoxazolines, and now this. We're going to have Simparica Trio, all these different things. There's a spectrum that you can do, but now the bar for what you're expected to do if you're a good pet owner, again, all these things that we say.
The guilt stuff.
Yeah, it's moving further and further out of the affordability range. And then, we've got David Sprinkle saying that, there's more income that we could get because they're spending on toys. And it's well, are they going to stop doing that to pay veterinary bills? It's a different psychological
whole different,
yeah. So it's, again, I struggle that we're just forcing more and more care onto a smaller and smaller audience, forgetting about all these people. And, we can be as nice or have as great relationships as we want, but unless we're having that honest relationship around what standard of care can you afford, which is also a terrible thing to have to ask somebody because you don't want to provide them with less than the gold standard. It's a pickle.
But then
It is a pickle.
But
Yeah.
to that point, understanding what someone can and can't afford, doesn't that open the door? Because, you know, I hear people kind of make snide comments about, you know, the companies that are opening in Walmart, et cetera. And I wonder though, shouldn't we be driving people there if they can't afford what our hospital offers instead, so that we can guarantee that that pet has good care? I am curious.
But you
about
can't
that.
guarantee it. How can you guarantee it? You can only suggest.
Well, but I mean, you know, they'd be in the care of a veterinarian, and as opposed to, you know, nothing.
Right, so you're saying that
Oh,
even
right.
same kind of care in a private practice, they're at least getting care, which they wouldn't. be
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or you're referring them to someplace where they could get care.
Exactly. This is some care better than no care at all.
Yep.
Right.
Right? I mean, regardless of what your definition or my definition of appropriate care might be, you know,
Right. You can just offer it. Absolutely. I mean, in several areas that I work in, people say, well, this is one way to do it, and then this is the other way, whichever one you feel more comfortable. It's making them feel comfortable getting the care they can get for their pets, regardless of if it's at Walmart or if it's at, you know, the Animal Medical Center.
Well, there's been really interesting, you know, so when, and so Diane, you remember this, so when PAWS, the Philly Animal Welfare Society, opened 2 clinics in Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania VMA and a bunch of other local people kind of were up in arms around how could these, subsidized centers open up and steal our customers. And of course, the answer being that they're really not stealing your customers.
right.
The number of people that you're providing care for in your clinic really isn't going to change. And the people that you're losing probably couldn't afford to come to you or weren't willing to pay for what you wanted anyway. So,
And didn't come that often, right?
yeah, and having that discussion as an industry and saying, you know, if you're providing lower cost options, are you going to lose customers?
Right.
Or does there have to be a balance? I don't know. It's a
Knowing your customer, right, and building your practice for the customer you are trying to serve is a whole different level of awareness.
Yep.
And just putting a sign on the door and hoping everybody who walks by is going to find you appropriate for their needs, right? So to some extent, it has to be okay to let people choose.
And then they could always come back too. I mean, someone
Right.
could be in a bad, you know, time, or something could be happening, but they want to make sure the pet's taken care of, and then they could boomerang back to you.
I mean,
Yep.
they'll choose anyway, to Bruce's point.
Yeah, they will.
Right.
So a couple things, Catherine, I want to be sure we teed up too here. You know, and again, we want to be really cognizant of everybody's time, especially some of you who might be East Coast, because it starts to get
Yeah,
late.
late.
9:15 my bedtime. You know, the whole idea of how can a practice differentiate themselves then? You know, I mean, is offering it, say that we are all after, we know who our pool of clients are, and our pool of clients have all these different needs and wants, and we're trying to retain them. What are the different things that you can do, they can do to help differentiate? I mean, do we have telehealth? Is in-home care going to be a trend? And what, you know, what are some of the things you're seeing that are good ideas that more practices should think about doing?
So I think there's 3 things I would lay out as big buckets, and then we can, I'm sure people have others, but then we could debate the big buckets. I think they have to be more convenient, open on the weekends, and open after 5 p.m. And it really frustrates me when practices say that they're not willing to do that, but yet they want more business. That's why
Right.
these other
Yeah.
I think Deb agrees.
yeah,
Do not tell me that you close at 5. Do not
Yeah.
tell me.
right. Yeah,
No
exactly.
human who works for a living can get there at 5.
Right.
I go to my vet because they're open on Sunday.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
I
they
mean,
need
I
to be open on
can make
Saturdays
an
and
appointment
Sundays.
on Sunday, you know?
Yeah. So that's one, make it more convenient, be open after hours and on the weekends. Number 2, be very transparent on your pricing, and that freaks everybody out in a primary care. Even the consultants in the space get freaked out about being transparent, like having your prices posted up. But if you've been to a Walmart, it's all posted right there, and I know exactly what I can afford from my weekly paycheck, and then I will care for my pet, you know, as I go along. So that's 2. And then for the primary care or the independent, utilize technology to better engage your client, whatever that technology is. And, you know, veterinarians are just, and I'm frustrated about it, so slow to adopt new technologies, whatever it is. Back 15 years ago, they were freaking out because of VetStreet automating postcards and they wanted their staff to do it, which was totally made no sense. But now we're just going through another phase of that, getting them comfortable with telehealth and other engagement platforms.
I agree. Clearly, I agree about the time. I almost jumped through the phone.
Yeah, yeah. And there's somebody I know on this call that I will not name, and I had a conversation with them, and their veterinarian was like, "Oh, I don't have time for all this stuff because I'm taking care of sick pets. That's what I'm doing all day, is taking care of sick pets." And I'm like, "Whoa, what is wrong with that equation? Why are we not taking care of well pets? Why aren't we thinking about well care, you know?"
Absolutely.
It's, yep, the well-being of yourself and the well-being of your pets. It's both ends of the leash. And that's what you really need to also focus on, I think, as a well-oiled machine. It's both ends of the leash.
Well, isn't the idea to keep them from getting sick, to help keep yourself from getting sick, right? To do everything you can so you don't need
I think
that,
as a profession that we're really good at focusing on. I mean, it's so immediate. So I think to that point, I mean, I would argue that they weren't saying I'm ignoring well pets, and they were saying that if there's an emergency with a sick pet, it's much easier to spend my attention on that and to do the
Right.
to do, rather than, when we talked about this, like the strategic approach from veterinarians is not something they usually want to do or spend time on. And change management around adopting technology, all those types of things are just like so far out of the ballpark of things they want to focus on. And having been in the clinic, like the immediacy of having a sick pet is gratifying because you can probably pick something to do with it. You're having an emotional experience that's positive because you're doing something that is gratifying. And it's just, these are all the problems that we have with making any change in animal health, right?
So one of my biggest pet peeves that I have with practices right now, and to me, it's the simplest thing, but it does go to the heart of technology, is I don't like to make phone calls. I never have liked to make phone calls. I go to Open Table. I reserve for restaurants. I can, my hair.
You're just antisocial, Catherine. That's
I'm so I'm such an introvert. But
exactly
what's crazy to me is that's the one thing you can't do with my veterinary hospital. I have to call them. And they'll even say, "Do you want to book online?" And I hit click and it says, "Call us." I'm like, wait a second.
That means you
actually have to be able to let me do that. And
so that makes you even angrier.
Yeah, it does. It just frustrates the little, and to me, it's the simplest thing. Imagine how much time you would free up. And I don't know how it all works to implement, so I don't even want to pretend to know. But the notion of just simply taking that job away from your front desk of how many times are I having to call, because even so, I do have to call for my groomer but everything else is digital. They tell me everything else. She's ready. You can come get her. Please confirm your appointment. Everything else is digital, but I have to call to book it, but everything else is, so I never have to talk to them afterwards. So
And 2 weeks go by and you don't call, right? I mean, that's what happens to me. Because I'm busy during the day, and then at 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, oh, darn it.
And then you're like, well, I can't.
Now I can't do it
tomorrow.
Right, right, exactly.
So
You're talking my language.
To continue the strategic part of this discussion, Bruce mentioned earlier, what are they measuring? And I do think one of the areas that's not measured well is the churn rate of clients.
Yeah.
A couple, 3 years ago, I was involved with an educational thing where we were talking with representatives, and the churn rate was brought out as 25% on an annual basis of clients, not necessarily animals. So the number one factor was death, or what's moving. The second factor was death. The other was death of a pet. Death of an owner first, death of a pet second.
So that was a permanent move then, right? A physical move,
Yeah.
a permanent move.
So you've got, Jules, what, 1,600, 1,700 individual clients per veterinarian on average. So you're losing 600 plus a year in a natural churn rate. So that's one factor. The second factor that came out of that discussion I've monitored since then is this trend for a multi-pet household. But if we look at veterinary records, we're not seeing that number of pets in those households. So if there's a trend there, the second pet, the third pet, the neighborhood cat, whatever, ends up being taken care of like the first one, but it's being done from alternate sources. And I think that's going to be really difficult to measure at any point. But we have to assume that I take the Morkie to the veterinarian, and if I had a second dog that was 8 years older and was doing okay, I'd probably judge what to do off of that. And not necessarily the dog that's about to go away or the new puppy that's just here. I'd probably not focus as much as I would on a 4, 5, 6-year-old dog I'd had around for a while.
Yeah, I think the periodicity of those appointments, and I mean, Bruce, I think it's lower now for a 12-month churn at like $1,250 or $1,100 per veterinarian in AHA hospitals. Is it that low now, I think?
Patients per veterinarian?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's gotten lower, yes.
And again, I think that's a comment around we're getting fewer pets, but making more money from those pets in the practice. And I think that goes more towards wellness and all those things. But I think your point around the periodicity of, how many are we losing from the initial not really seeing again until something wrong.
Yeah, I'd be curious because of who you work for. I'd be curious how many homes have 2 and 3 policies.
Yeah, I mean, it's those. We have those conversations all the time around the bondedness of pets, and I mean, it's in short, it's different because like they're generally such highly bonded parents that they tend to be going to the vet anyway. But I think incumbent on us as an industry is to examine how we can design products that help financial affordability and financing for pets that aren't being seen by our current model. I think that's one of the areas personally that I'm most interested in that we help to approach.
That'd be a fun follow-up here. My executive assistant over here is telling me that she thinks time is up because it's time for her to go out and go potty.
So with that, you guys, we always want to be careful. This has been fantastic and really robust. I do want to say to everybody, if you have not yet read this month's issue of Today's Veterinary Business, it's actually one of the best ones they've put out in a long time. It was a page turner for me. I literally have been every single article. I mean, when it came out digitally, I was already going through it, but then when I finally got the paper one, I was actually flipping through it. So this article that I have shared here is in that publication. You also have the link in the chat. But I think this is just the beginning of many conversations we're going to start having about this. We are going to be diving in more in depth in this access to care and these other models coming up here shortly. So do check our calendar for that. Before we all sign off, I do want to give you all a preview of something really special that is coming. If you are going to VIS, Brenda and I are going to throw a birthday bash because we are both entering a new decade and we are having a birthday party at VIS. So we're not saying how old or nothing. We're just saying we're on the 0 number. So, so if you're at VIS, you guys are going to get information on that coming up, but I do hope you all can come to our birthday bash. And with that, I actually have barely enough for a closing toast.
I tried to save a teeny bit.
I know, that's why we do 45 minutes because we run out of time. But listen,
we run out of cocktails. That's what happens.
That's when you know it's over. But for that, you guys, we really want to thank you for coming to the Bridge Club tonight, having this incredibly robust conversation. We have much more to discuss on this, but I do believe right now that where the pets are in our laps where they belong when they love us the most. So cheers to that.
Cheers.
And I barely have any.
Oh.
All right.